last year I decided to plant tomatoes. So I went and I got this tomato plant, not realize there was a vine tomato, right? So all of a sudden these things start to grow and grow and grow, and it's taking over everything. I really enjoy the little tomatoes, but I say, okay, I'm not doing that next year.
Yeah, you talk about Jack and the Beanstalk.
That's
You are listening to What's Next? Conversations with Boomers, and I'm Barb Desmarais, your host. We have got a really fun episode. You're going to love it. Today, we have on Leo Santana, who is an interior designer, owns a design company called De Novo. He has a partner and a founder of the company. Leo does everything from paint consultations to designing wallpaper, fabrics, interior design, and he also is an avid gardener and loves to decorate the garden and the surroundings of the garden. So I thought, why don't we have Leo come on and teach us about beautifying our balconies? So many of us have downsized from our family home to a condo, and we have either a patio or we have a balcony. Some of those balconies are really small. Some of them are large. So, Leo, welcome to the program, to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be back and to talk about a subject that I love. Is a passion, is a hobby, and something that I always like to do. Right. So every chance that I have, I am with my hands on the dirt and planting. If I have a large pot or a small pot or a big yard, I always liked planting. So this for me will be fantastic.
Oh, great. Right. And I forgot to say that you are a return guest. And welcome back.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And who knows, we'll probably have you on again. Okay. So first of all, Leo, what are some kind of basic guidelines around adding flowers to your balcony? Let's just talk in the general to start with.
Well, for one of the things we have to take in consideration, of course, everybody lives in different zones, right? Like we are here in British Columbia, beautiful British Columbia. Of course, we have all 4 seasons. Some places in other countries, you might not notice the season so much. So, of course, plants will react to where are they growing, what kind of weather, what kind of seasons so that's one of the things you have to take in consideration. Where do you live and what plants will do well there? What kind of flowers will do well there, right? So that's the first thing, because if I plant something that is very tropical, because I love tropical plants, so I have to be careful, because of course when comes the winter, if I don't know what to do with them, how to protect them, they will die, right? So one of the first things I always consider is, where do I live? What's the kind of weather that I have? And so on. Once I know that, what zone we live, right? Like in Canada, we have 4 or 5 different zones. So that's the main thing, because I don't want the plants to be dying on me every time that, So of course, yes, there are the annuals and there are perennials. Of course, perennials will come back every year, as long as they don't die with a frost or so on. And then the annuals, which those are the fun ones, because you can just bring color, like instant color, to your garden or to your balcony, right? So for me, those are the main things that I always concentrate on. And where do I live? And then I can go and choose what kind of plants. And then of course it's totally up to you. If you like more flowers, if you like more foliage, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
That's important, yes, to know the zone, because as you say, somebody could decide, oh, I love tropical plants, and then find out later, oh, they don't grow here at all. I want to ask you about I took a course one time on container gardening. So most of us have
Mhm.
containers on our balcony. And the rule was have a thriller and a spiller and a filler. Do you endorse that? Do you go by that rule as well?
Um, yes, most of the time, yes, because see, again, it goes back to that. Okay, what kind of plants do I like, right? I, personally, I do like I was saying before, I was born in Brazil, so I grew up with tropical plants, and so I like bringing that feeling to my balcony, and so I go with big leaves, right, like hostas or calla lilies or ornamental banana leaves, right? So I have a small balcony, so I have to be careful what I bring because I don't want one plant to totally, the thriller to totally take over, right? So I have to be selective there. But yes, I do agree. It's a nice way. Again, it's that rule of three that we apply in design, right? Rule of three. So on this case, the thriller, this pillar, and it just creates a nice balance. Another thing that you have to take in consideration is where, if you're grouping plants, okay, your thriller is the one that's going to grow the highest, so you don't want to put in front of the other plants, right? So you have to, like everything in design, you have to plan, you know what I mean? So okay, so the plants that are going to grow the most will be on the back, right, and the midsection, and then these pillars, which kind of it just flows and kind of create that nice cascade or something. So yes, that's one of the ways, of the many ways that you can, work with plants.
Leo, maybe we should give people an idea. I mean, if you've never planted a container before, or you've planted a container but really didn't know how to do it, give some examples of what some good thrillers are and fillers and spillers.
Okay, let's say, like I was saying in my case, like a ornamental banana tree, right? They don't grow very big, but they do spill. Or a canna lily, right? That grows tall and then it has a beautiful flower on top, right? So those are the thrillers, right? Um, um, Another thing, even an ornamental grass that grows nice and tall. So anything that, or let's say a Japanese maple, right? It's a beautiful on a container. It can be quite beautiful. That's gonna be the top, right? Sometimes bamboo, right? So everything that will be the most visual impact, right? So that would be your thriller, right? The filler would be something that would be around that plant as a base, right? So it's gonna grow, I don't know, maybe no more than halfway than the bigger one, because you don't want to be, also basically something that will grow like, half to maybe, 1/3 of the thriller plant. And then of course these pillars, which is usually something like lobelias, right? Or even beautiful pansies. So that they are the trailing ones. So those that trails and then cascade, or fuchsias, that those nice cascade fuchsia. So those are um, anything that will cascade, so that will become our fillers, right? So
Spillers.
yeah, so that's the usually. So again, it's with that, like small, medium, and large, right? Again, the rule of three. So I'm applying with, as a designer, I always tend to apply that rule of three. Is even with planting. Mhm.
Leo, can you talk a little bit about lobelia? I buy lobelia every single year, but I have such bad luck with it. It just dies. As much as I try to water it, what is the secret with to keeping lobelia alive?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a secret. Of course, a light is important, right? So I don't know your balcony, what you're facing, because that's another thing that I was going to mention when we talk about one of the important things about planting is, okay, are you facing north, south, east, west, right? How much sun do you you have. And some plants will do terribly if it's too much sun, and others will not thrive if it's too much shade, right? So that's another important thing when you're picking, choosing your plants. Now back to lobelia, which actually has been a while since I used lobelia, uh, but yeah, they do, it doesn't have to be too much sun, but they do like sun. They will not thrive on the shade. Most plants that bloom, they need the sun, right? That's why when you have a shady place, a shady uh, uh, location, uh, things like hostas or ferns, which I love them, they will thrive because they don't even bloom. I mean, hostas has some blooms to it, but you will getting hostas more because of the leaves. Really, the leaves are the showstopper. So the flowers are not that significant on a. So, but if there's a plant that like blooming, most of them, not all of them, they will thrive if you have enough sun, right? Of course, watering is very important. People, keep watering every day. No, it's like, they will also, they need, uh, uh, not every plant needs to be watered every day, sometimes once a week. Of course, depending on the weather, if it's too hot, then maybe a couple of times or so on. So again, it's all depending on the plant. Another thing that happens often is people plant uh, plants with different needs, watering needs together. So if I have a hosta, right, and I can let's say that's quite exaggerating, but let's say if I have a hosta and then I have like a cacti, they are not going to work together because a hosta likes more, or fern likes more wet soil, and a cacti is not going to. And some people sometimes they don't think about that, or even like something that's very common, those succulents, right? They don't need a lot of water. You water like once a week, maybe twice, once every 2 weeks, because they do, keep the water, so they don't need a lot of water. So I have to be careful what I plant with. So sorry, back to lobelia. It's because I so much to explain, so I get out of
I know.
uh, so, but back to lobelia, I would say, less sun, kind of I would say kind of part sun, not too much sun, because they are fragile. They are so feathery, kind of a nice, delicate plant. So they will fry. It's too much sun. Uh, just make sure that before you water, that the soil is kind of a little on the dry side. Not only dry, because then you immediately you can see that they kind of a wilt if it's dry, right? So I always, go in the morning, touch, okay, it's still a little moist and so on. The floor is not too dry. Oh, the soil is not too dry. Right? So it's that's the secret. Not too much light. Don't let it totally dry, right? So keep that kind of yeah. And hopefully you have a green thumb, because that helps a lot. My friends always say, your plants don't do so well. But like my mom, I do. I'm happy to say I do have a green thumb. It seems that everything that I plant, and then I have friends that said, "Oh my God, I just look at a plant and the plant dies." Right?
Leo, what about when, planting in a container? I was always taught put as much as possible in the container. Don't, we're not like a garden bed where you're kind of planting, a few inches apart. In a container, you cram as much in as possible. Do you agree with that?
I don't necessarily agree with that, because different plants will grow on the different if you plant everything together, some plants will take over and will pretty much kill the ones that don't, the let's say the not so strong plants. Because I had that experience. I went immediately satisfaction with my plants. I went to plant and put the container, and it looks like it's been there forever, right? So I used to put a lot of plants there, and then all of a sudden I had to start, okay, they are dying. First of all, there's no air circulation, and that's when you start getting mildew and all that kind of stuff, right? So you have to be careful with that. I do not necessarily agree with that, just because I had problems before.
That's interesting. But gardening is such an experimental kind of thing, isn't it? You every year is a little bit different, and you learn, okay, that didn't work, so scrap that this year, and I think I'm going to try. Do you do that? I mean, you're an avid gardener, obviously. Do you try different things all the time?
All the time. I want to try, so I take pictures of all my containers, right? So because then I said, okay, this worked well this summer, and I love this, so I will plant that again next year. Or, oh, this one didn't do so well. Obviously, it's the wrong location, or it's just not, agree with whatever is happening here. So I like it, but it's not going to work next year. So I'm not going to, spend time and money and all that work on something that is not going to thrive. Like last year, another thing that I like mixing is flowers, and even though it's a container, I always like having some herbs. So I always have like rosemary. I might have a sage, or I might have even mint, because those are things that I use, or basil, because I use those on my kitchen. So it's nice to have a little container with that's my herb container. But again, rosemary, doesn't need a lot of water, because it's kind of a Mediterranean plant, so it likes dry and so on. So I cannot mix that with, let's say, with mint, because mint likes to have moisture and a moist soil, kind of a wetter, kind of a more wet soil. So I had to be careful with that. But last year I decided to plant tomatoes. So I have plants, I have flowers, but I decided I wanted tomatoes. I like those cherry tomatoes. I never planted tomato in my life. Right, my mom used to plant, and I used to love as a kid just to go and pluck right on the plant and eat. Right, so I thought, oh, I want to do that again. So I went and I got this tomato plant, not realize there was a vine tomato. Right, so all of a sudden these things start to grow and grow and grow, and it's taking over everything. And I didn't want to, it's beautiful. But this vine was like the what is that, the giant and the bean, or whatever that fable is, the magical bean. So that's the magical tomato was taking over the my little bubble. I really enjoy the little tomatoes, but I say, okay, I'm not doing that next year. Right, so this year I'm not going plant tomatoes, at least not a vine tomatoes anyway.
Yeah, you talk about Jack and the Beanstalk.
That's
Yeah. Okay, gosh, there's so much to talk about. Let's talk about north facing versus south facing. What and as you say, we're in all different zones around the world. We're in the West Coast, so maybe we can't cover every zone, every part of the world. So we'll talk about the West Coast of British Columbia. So you've got a north-facing balcony, and somebody else has a south-facing balcony. So what guidelines can you give them?
All right. And I had the experience with both, because I have a place in North Shore, in North Vancouver, facing the mountain. So I get very little direct sunlight, right? So luckily, because I do like foliages, so I could, I research, and there are some plants that bloom on a north facing with very little light, like fuchsia. Fuchsia, amazingly, they do very well. They don't need a lot of light. But there are not many plants that you can, put on a north facing. But I had this beautiful it's like a forget-me-not with those tiny little blue flowers, and it did so well. It just took over, and so I had this splash of blue, and then the fuchsias with the pink. So they together came out it became so nice. Another one that did very well was the bleeding hearts. Also did very well north facing, but the rest was pretty much foliages. A lot of ferns, some grasses that do well actually on a shady garden. Of course, the hostas, the ferns, and of course evergreens. Right, there are some species of evergreens that do very well. So that's for north facing because very little life. Of course, you have to check with your greenhouse.
Leo, I've always planted, I mean, I'm in a different place than I was when we were last talking. And it's not north facing, but I'm surrounded by a very thick hedge. So it doesn't get a lot of light, but I put a lot of impatiens and begonia in it, and they do okay.
Absolutely. Impatiens, they really thrive on shade. I forgot about that, but they do really thrive. They really go crazy, right? And they last long. They go until the first frost, right? So they go throughout and always blooming. So that's a good call. The other one you mentioned,
Begonia?
the begonias, yes. I do actually now. I still have that place, but I'm living on in English Bay, and we are kind of a east south kind of so we got quite a bit of sun in the morning, most of the morning till kind of mid afternoon, depending on the time of the year, and but I still have begonias. But what I do, my begonia, I make sure that is on a shaded side of the balcony, right? And usually protected by other plants, so behind other plants, and they do very well. Even though I get a lot of sun, right? So begonia, and I have to make sure that the soil is always moist and not too dry because they like that, like they like the coolness. So that's very important too. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to a south facing balcony, or a balcony that gets a lot of sun.
Tons of sun. Of course, it helps if you have a faucet or a hose in your balcony, because what I do is like this big water, can that I keep going back and forth to the kitchen, fill it up, and back to the to the balcony. But like I was saying before, cacti, of course, but not everybody wants to deal with cacti. They can be very prickly, of course. But there are a lot of some loving plants, right? And flowers, right? So trying to think what would be, because see, even though I have a lot of sun on my balcony, I still go for more the kind of I like having the foliages, and not all of them are good for a lot of sun. But grasses, beautiful containers with beautiful grasses. There are so many different kind of grasses that grows very nicely, and they are low maintenance. Right? There, like I mentioned before, even some herbs that looks quite beautiful, or boxwood. The boxwood on a container looks quite nice. All sort of flowers. Last year, for example, on the container that gets more sun on my balcony, I planted actually wildflowers. Just one little bag of wildflowers, and they did so well because they love sun, right? So that container again was kind of taking over, and I got all these different varieties of flowers, right, on the same container. So it looks like a miniature garden, a miniature kind of a English garden, because there were so many beautiful flowers. And the good thing about those packages, you not always know what you're gonna get, right? So all of a sudden, oh, what flower is that? So I was really happy with that. So this year I did the same thing, right? So I like having those different flowers, because it's again, and they bloom in different time of the season, right? So all season along ahead. So those are also very good for south because they had poppies. Poppies love the sunshine, like the California poppies, the regular poppies. So, and another one's like foxgloves. Foxgloves also love sun, right? Of course, the pansies, because they always, the geraniums in my building, like the beautiful geraniums all year, not all year long, but all summer along. And geraniums, they also love, because again, if you think about the Mediterranean, if you ever been to Greece or Portugal, they have a lot of sun, hot sun, and they have beautiful windows, with all those geraniums, and they are so easy to grow. Right, you just have to remember to deadhead, because the more you deadhead, the more new bloom comes up. Right, but again, that's so many. I mean, we'll have to make a list of some loving plants. But that's the thing: when you choose new plants, make sure that you read the label. There is that like shade, part sun, part shade, and sunny. Right.
Leo, just want to go back to the wildflowers. So you bought a package of seeds and they had a mixture of
Yes.
wildflowers? Wow.
Yeah,
And
that's
when did
correct.
you plant? What month did you plant?
I planned early May, because I want to make sure that when they start coming out was not too cold, because then it could die. Because you plant directly on the soil in a container, right? So I want to make sure that was not going to. And because my balcony is a little protected, I thought, okay, May would be a good time. But it started with like when they germinated, like within a week, you start seeing the little bits of greens, and when they take off, boy, they take off.
So we're mid-June right now. How tall are they?
Some already start blooming, because the little ones, and there are some that you can see, because like on the mix last year, I don't know what I'm getting this year, but on the mix last year, I had hollyhock, and the hollyhock was pretty much the last ones to, because they grow into a bigger plant, right? But when it was like August, they were blooming and they were so beautiful, so much that I actually for one of my wallpapers and my fabrics, I actually create a pattern based on those flowers. I basically just draw the flowers, I paint the flowers, and I create a nice pattern for wallpaper and fabric. So again, my garden gives me a lot of inspiration.
No kidding. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Anything that we want to there's so much to talk about. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about decor. So, yeah, do you find that less is more, or is it just put as much stuff in your balcony as you want because you want to create some ambiance, you want it to be an outdoor experience?
What happened is, again, is like a house, right? I treat my balcony like it's an extension of my house, right? So, what is the purpose of my balcony? Do I want a balcony just to put plants there, and or it depends, of course, depending on the size of the balcony. If it's a miniature garden, a balcony, there is so much you can put there. You still want to be able to step outside, right? Of course, new condominiums, these smaller condominiums, you can find anything from a tiny balcony to a very large one. So, what is the purpose of your balcony? You want a place to relax. So, do you have enough room to put, let's say, a lounge chair there, or even a small chair that with a little bistro table that in the morning you can go sit and have a cup of coffee and read a book, or you have enough big enough that you can entertain. Then when I had a patio, I could entertain, so I had like a nice 8 people the place table, chairs. Then I had a little kind of a lounge sofa, exterior outdoor sofa on another corner, and so on. So because that allowed me to do that. In some balconies you can do that. Other balconies are so small you won't be able to do it. I don't think that more is better. Even if I do have a large space, I still want to make sure that's well designed, it's well, proportional. And like I say, if you entertain, then yes, you have to make sure that you have enough place for people to come and sit and have a drink or a dinner. If it's not that big enough, then I have to think about storage, because if I want to my plants and I need a place to storage my tools, to store pots, to storage soil, and so on, like or pillows. So there are a lot of furniture that serve as a double kind of a function, right? So there are beautiful benches that you can sit, put nice pillows, but you open and all your tools and all the whatever you don't want to see goes into those. So Yes, again, is like I said, it depends the function, what you need, you know, do you entertain, or it's just gardening? And if it's just gardening, do you have a place where you're gonna prepare your pots? So maybe you want a little planting station, right? So so there are a lot of things that you have to consider when you uh, um, decorating your balcony. So is this a multi-purpose, right? So which is the mostly are multi-purpose. You want to do as much as you can with your balcony, right? So you need area to sit, right? You need maybe a small dining space if you have, big enough. You have to have your containers, and then you have to have your hidden storage. Right? Those are the main things that I consider when I'm decorating, uh, um, designing a balcony.
Okay, let's pretend somebody they've got we'll say medium-sized balcony, not tiny, not huge, and they want a balcony just to go out and relax. Decorate that for us.
All right. So what I would do, of course, again, depending on my square area, I would need place to sit, place to put my drink, you know, my coffee, my tea, my wine, whatever I'm doing. So I will get, let's say, um, if I don't entertain a lot, at least a couple of chairs, because I will have some company to come, a friend to visit. We want to sit outside, right? With a small table. Now that table can be the size of maybe a medium to large size coffee table, right? With storage, right? So we think about storage because you might want to put things away. Um, if you do have enough room, maybe a little side table that you can have, even outdoor glasses or a little dish or so on, if you really want to entertain. Um, Another things that are lighting. I love lighting, especially at night. So you might want to put some nice uh, lights on your pots, right? Some lights, it can be solar power, so you don't even need to connect if you have enough sun. If you don't, if you're not facing, then you might want something that you can plug in. Plus, a plant that's lit at night, it looks so pretty, right? So I do have light all year round, not just for Christmas, because I like lighting on my even on my little balcony, right? When I had a garden, then my trees would have lighting because I think it looks so pretty at night. Uh, so maybe a little area carpet, depending what kind of floor you have on your patio. Sometimes it's just a concrete, so it's kind of not the most. So maybe an area rug, or there are other ways of address the floor, right? So there are sometimes like even a wooden kind of tiles that you can put on it and looks quite nice. If you get a lot of sun, you might want to have an umbrella, right? So you want to have something to protect you from the sun because you don't want to be sitting there and being uncomfortable because it's too hot. So what else? A wall decor. Some places might not allow, some condominiums might not allow you to put things on the walls, but if they do, you know what I mean? I would treat like a room. You're decorating a room. It's an extension of your house, right? So yes, pretty much it. If I have more space, then I put more things. Sometimes, you can put even like a outdoor sofa when more people can sit around, and you can make an arrangement around that, like pretty much creating a nice little living room outside, right? So, but if you don't, then 2 chairs is enough, or maybe just one lounge chair where you can actually lie down and read a book, and a small chair for someone else to sit on it.
But add plants. Even if you're just wanting to go out there and relax, add plants to your balcony along with your chair and your table.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's I was just talking about the furnishing, but of course the
Right.
plants you do. And another thing too, a lot of people don't think about that, but it doesn't have to be always on the floor, right? There is the vertical planting. there are some wall planters that you can hang on the wall. So because you don't have a lot of enough room on the floor itself, use your walls, right? So you can have vertical planting, which can be quite beautiful. And nowadays, you can buy some beautiful trellises or shelves that you can put your plants on those shelves, and that's another way of and those live walls, right? Depending on of course, a little bit more work, but it looks beautiful. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all like containers on the floor.
Just getting back to the furniture, I find that it makes a big difference if you spend a little bit of money on nice looking furniture rather than something plastic from Walmart, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Uh, yeah, I haven't bought any of those, but of course, you buy what you can afford, but make sure that it's gonna look nice. Uh, I remember selling actually some raw iron furniture that looks quite beautiful, or buying on let's say even Facebook Market. You know what I mean? There are always people selling stuff, and sometimes it might not be. I remember one lady, she bought these tables that I had, and chairs, like raw iron chairs and so on, and she loves it, and she was going just to repaint them, right? So sometimes you find amazing furniture, you know, and you don't have to spend a fortune for it. But yes, I would avoid plasticky kind of things. First of all, plastic is not my thing, but it's the same thing with, like, there's a lot of plastic containers that looks quite good because they do look like terracotta and so on. And for some situations, they are good because they are not going to crack if they freeze and so on, right? But I try to avoid. I do like my real terracotta, my real ceramic pots, and so on. But the same thing with furniture. If you can get a beautiful, thick chair versus a plastic chair, of course, I'm gonna, buy something like that. Again, it may be a little bit more maintenance because with thicky wood, you might have to oil and make it, but it's the same thing in your house. I mean, you still have to polish your wooden furniture if you want to keep for long, right? So the same thing, you're gonna do the same thing for your outdoor furniture.
And also, when you can see your balcony from your living room, for instance, you're consuming that outside from the inside, right? You're that outside space becomes part of your living space, even just visually.
Absolutely, and that's your balcony, like your garden. It has to be an extension of your house, right? So it makes it's nice to flow. You cannot, you can do whatever you want, but you should not um have a completely different kind of feel on your balcony than you have in your house. If you have more of a traditional house, you don't want to go outside and have this balcony that's ultra modern, right? Or vice versa. You know what I mean? You have this beautiful modern contemporary place, and then you go outside and you have like all antique furniture, and it just kind of it's just disconnected. So you want to make sure that what's happening inside is gonna flow into the outside, and the outdoors, and vice versa, right? It's the same thing
Yeah,
if
you
you have
want
a very modern
continuity.
house. Absolutely. You make sure that, if you have when you're doing landscape, if you have a house, let's say, you want to make sure that the landscape matches the house, right? You don't this beautiful old traditional home with a garden that is so sleeky and modern. It's just disconnected, right? So, yeah.
Just talking about flooring, do you ever use mad mats? Do you know
I
what mad
and
mats are?
but you're talking about the ones, you're not talking about the washable ones. Which
Well,
ones? I
they're
don't
not
use those.
washable. They're made from recycled material, and they're specially, I guess you could put them indoor, but they've got sort of a, they've They've got an outdoor feel to them, but they're lovely, and you can get them in all sorts of patterns. And there's imitation mad mats is actually what they're called, and there's imitations of them. What do you put on your floor, on your balcony floor?
Well, because we do have a nice, our building is from 1959. So it has that retro look. So the tiles that they have there, I love it because it suits the building. So I didn't want to hide. Plus, like I said, it's such a miniature balcony that anything that I put there is gonna, kind of won't make sense. So right now, I kept the tiles that we have there. That's those red terracotta tiles. So I love them. I think they look perfect with what I have. My place in North Van, because it's a modern condominium, so they have those big concrete slabs, which is not my favorite. So the dining area section of the balcony, I had a carpet, outdoor carpet, right? So I like that because it creates different zones within the patio, right? So if you have a balcony that's large enough, that's another way of creating different zones. Maybe a nice outdoor area rug. So this is where we have our meal, right? Or this is where we sit down. So right now I don't, but I've seen before, and I've done before for clients, even not all um, grass, like it's imitation grass. Of course, they are not natural grass, but there's some that absolutely you have to take a second look and touch to make sure that's not real. So they done before was that green that like you can tell a mile away that's like so fake, right? But I had clients that they didn't want to put a carpet, but they wanted to have that feel that they were outside. So we did the entire balcony with that grass. A little expensive, but it looks beautiful, right? And you have the feeling that you are actually in a garden, right? So that's another way
Mm.
of doing it as well. But I usually, that doesn't happen very often because not everybody likes that. The fake grass, no matter how natural they look, it's still fake. But I usually rely more on area rugs because there's so many beautiful area rugs. And again, and they are not that expensive. And some area rugs, you can even change them something more colorful or bright on the summer, and then when it comes fall, you can change it to something more fall colors, winter colors. So because a lot of balconies, especially if they're a little protected, people still sit outside, or they might put a heater, outdoor heater, and I have clients that we have heaters outside, and they still entertain outside with nice beautiful blankets on the sofa and so on, and we still could sit outside and have another people. If it's again big enough, you can even have a fire pit, right? There's those fire pits and sit around. So small fire pits, I see those all the time in balconies. So you can use, if you know how to decorate, and how to use your balcony, you can use actually all year round.
I was just when you were describing your balcony in North Vancouver, I'm curious, what color is your carpet underneath the table?
On this particular one, I use a blue with some stripe. I might have some pictures. If I have some pictures, I would send and post them.
Okay,
But
good.
yes, I had something that was more. I didn't want to put too much color because I wanted keep, because my chairs were very colorful. Each chair, they were all the same chair, but each one was a different color. So I didn't want to, put a carpet that was too colorful because then it would be way too busy, right?
Gosh, there's so much to talk about. I think, even with a balcony or a patio, without an actual garden, we can create beautiful outdoor spaces, right?
Especially because a lot of people, they don't. You see, I'm lucky enough that where our balcony, it's facing the water, right? We are right in English Bay, so we see the beach and so on. So I'm very, very lucky that way. But not everybody has a nice view, right? Like my place in North Bend, because it's on the ground floor facing north, I didn't have a great view. That's why I want to make the patio itself, the planting, lush, and because that was my view, my own balcony. On this case, it's a small balcony, but we have this amazing view. So it's the beach and so on. So there are some little details that I bring that reminds me, that makes people remember or remind them of a beach place, right? So even a little sign on the wall that says beach. And of course, and I live on Beach Avenue, so the sign was perfect. There's beach, right? And little pebbles, just like little decorations, maybe a lantern. I mean, something that all these little details. It's like decorating a house. Not too much, but just enough details to give that feel.
Yeah, I my I've got a patio. I'm on the first floor of my building, and as I was saying, it can only take shade. But I don't sit out there very much, Leo, because I'm right next to the train, and when the train whistle blows, it is deafening. But I've got large windows. I love to look at it. It does become part of my whole environment.
Right. And that's what was pretty much happening with me. Like, I like looking at it. So even if I was not outside on my patio, looking outside, I made sure that the little sofa that I had with beautiful, colorful pillows and a statue was right direct to the window. So when I'm looking outside, that's what I'm seeing. So it's like the room went outside. You know what I mean? So because I didn't have a great view, the planting behind the sofa, the statue, the light at night, the pillows, the little table and so on. That was so basically the building across. I didn't even notice because I created a focal point, right? And that's what people should do. If there is something that is not too attractive or they are not happy to look at, create a distraction. Put something that your eye will go to that instead of the area that you don't like or don't like to look at it. So sometimes what I used to do, because again on the ground floor, people sometimes would be walk outside and they could see my patio. But if I was having guests and we are having dinner, I had a screen, looks like a Japanese screen, but just a screen that I would place. So people, when they walk by, they would see a nice screen, but wouldn't see us having dinner outside, right? Well, there's so many tricks you can use to create privacy and to create a focal point. You know what I mean? Some of the statues that I used to have on my patio, I actually moved into this little balcony, and still made it work. Only two of them, of course, but still, they are not that large, but they still work, right? So, but again, even though it's a tiny little balcony and my focal point is really the beach, but I still want to have those kind of little things that I look and brings me happiness, right? Or makes me think of, this this Buddha head that I have is from Bali, so it makes me think of a tropical place, right? So something like that.
Well, I just love this because if you don't have a view, create your own view,
Yeah,
right?
yes, like I said,
Just yeah,
yeah.
decorate your outdoor space so that when you're looking outside, you see these beautiful plants, furniture, decor, and that's what you look at. I don't have a view, so yeah, I'm really enjoying having a little garden to look out to. Leo, oh gosh, there's so much. Oh, this is so fun. Oh gosh. And I sometimes, when I see a naked balcony, I think, what? I know it's not everybody's interest at all, but just you could create such a beautiful little space for yourself there. And it doesn't have to
But
be huge.
But you know what is worse than an empty balcony for me is those balconies that people just see storage everything in it, and you
Oh yeah.
walk, you see boxes, and you see it's just like storage room. And I think that is, I rather see an empty balcony than see people. Please don't. It's just ugly, and your neighbor don't deserve to look at your discarded things. If you don't have his storage means, and if he's on your balcony, obviously you don't need that. So get rid of it, sell, or I just don't understand why people put so much junk on their balconies. I just don't understand. So I rather
I'm
see it
glad you brought
into
that up. I know. Well, you're absolutely right. It's worse and such an eyesore when you're walking past a balcony that is just full of a couple of bikes and boxes and equipment and oh yeah. Oh. Okay.
another
Oh,
Oh, just one more thing that because we love plants, and gardeners, I think if you even if you're not a real gardener, but most gardeners, if you ask, because you see a lot of artificial plants, you know what I mean. Some areas I might understand well, or maybe you don't have a green thumb, but you like plants and so on. So there are some beautiful artificial plants, but with artificial plants, eventually they will fade because they are getting sun and so on, and they really look bad. So if you're going to have art, if you cannot plant really, if you're really not into the planting and you wanna, yes, but make sure that you buy something that looks very nice. And when it starts fading, please replace it. But that is kind of a last, way that I would go in terms of gardening is the artificial. I have nothing artificial on my house, but I understand that some people say, "Oh, I just can't plant. I don't know how to plant, and I want to have something." Then go for it, make sure that it's beautiful, and when it starts fading, just throw it away and get something new.
good tip. Yeah. Okay, a huge thank you to you, Leo. This is really fun. And it's an idea that I had for a long time. And then it took me a while to get it together. So I'm so glad that you were available. How can people reach you?
Okay, well, yes, my email address it's Leo Santana Santana design @gmail.com. So anybody can reach me that way, and send me an email. I'm also on Instagram, and actually probably you see some of my garden pictures on Instagram. Leo.Santana decor. That's on my Instagram. If if we post, so, and there'll be quite a few pictures there. And yes. Oh, and
I'm going
on
to
my
add you right away.
design site, that's of course you can see some of my designs, especially for the fabrics inspiration with the flowers. There's a lot of florals there. Is denovodesign.com. So
DenovoDesign.com.
design.com. Yes.
Okay. Thank you again. This has just been really great. Here on What's Next, we cover a wide range of topics. We've gone from exercise to gardening. Yeah, thank you again, Leo. And thanks to my sister for referring you to me to you.
You're very welcome, and was a pleasure being here again. And who knows, if you have some subject that you think I can be helpful, I'll be delighted to do this again.